The discussion will be focused on most strategic countries and international regions for growth and investment, and also on the role of key topics like innovation, sustainability, and technology that are also IARR top topics. Then, our goal is, before celebrating you, don't worry, giving you also some food of thoughts. And we do hope, and I'm sure that with these honorable speakers, we can do it. Let's start with you, Dr. Cieśliniński. Ladies first, of course. Innovation, technology, and sustainability. These are the key words of successful companies like yours. You work in the Kyoto Protocol process with the creation of the carbon market and acted as a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which received the 2007 Nobel Prize. Now you lead Global Thermostat, a carbon-negative technology company. What are the next frontiers for the sustainable industry, and what kind of challenges will you face in the near future?
The challenges of innovation are all internal. They are about redefining success so that it doesn't become acceptance, but it becomes what needs to be done and what brings in the right future, what creates the future. We are in a process of creating the future. We can create the future. We have to create the right future. That's what innovation is all about. Very often, it's not recognized, it's not rewarded. That's why I'm very surprised that I was found, my company was just selected as the world's top 10 most innovative company listed in Fast magazine in Silicon Valley in the field of energy. I was very surprised. Not because it's not innovative, because when you do a lot of innovation, you know that you don't get rewarded, you get punished. Therefore, I must be doing something wrong for getting all these awards. So again, you have to disassociate yourself from the, the normal award system in order to be able to do innovation. What needs to be understood is that capitalism is now somersaulting, transforming itself. You just pointed out an example, the carbon market of the Kyoto Protocol. Indeed, I designed that and I wrote it. I wrote it myself into the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. It became international law 2005 and is now trading over $300 billion a year and is meant to be one of the largest or the largest commodity market in the world very soon. It's a financial market. It's a financial market that is critical for sustainability. These two things come together. That is what we need to do. In the transformation of capitalism that goes ahead, we need markets that realize financially the value of the most important resources for humankind, for our survival as a species on this planet, and they are biodiversity, a clean atmosphere, water, because these are the basic needs of a human without which we cannot survive. We cannot live very long without food, maybe a few weeks. We cannot live very long without water, maybe a few days. We cannot live very long at all without air. So those are the most important resources, and what we need is to create for them, as we have done in the atmosphere, new global markets that create a new form of capitalism that value the most important resources and the survival of our species.
Mr. Andy Kawaja, you are leading with success Allied Wallet, an online payment solutions company. In your opinion, what is your strategy for improving an industry like yours?
Hello, everybody. It's very simple, actually, and we've seen it happen in the few years ago in the financial market when it crashed. International business is very important. We've seen the weakness in the U.S. market that majority of the banks in the U.S., they focus more on domestic business. And Allied Wallet has taken, strategic in more global transactions. And we looked at countries that they need the services to be able to conduct transactions digitally, not physically. We call it the digital dollar. And we provided our software to countries in Asia and in Europe, which is a little bit undeveloped in the technology part, based on the banking system that they were more relying on generating income based on refinance and loans for commercial properties and residential properties, and they left the e-commerce part alone because they never saw the future that e-commerce and electronic transaction is going to be what it is today, which is generating 60% of all income for shops or even websites online and etc. So banks never paid attention to that. And about 20 years ago, when we looked at what could possibly be changed in the internet world and what could possibly be done to accommodate consumers all around the world, is to add credit card payments online. So websites can transact and they can generate income. And we, can be many entrepreneurs they came out, and as we see today, I mean, there's a lot of very new billionaires and multimillionaires from little tiny apps that they create, and based on transactions that they do electronically. And we opened the channel for people to transact in every single region in the world. Basically, you can be in the US and you can accept transactions from Japan, from China, from Europe, while the domestic banks, they're a little bit more tied up based on the compliance rules that they have because they're not much experienced in the technology world. And I mean, I give you a small, small tip. US domestic bank, if you ever transact with, if you have anything over 8% of your transaction that come outside the U.S. jurisdiction, they consider this as potentially high fraud for the future. So they'll terminate your account and they'll literally put you out of business because they don't understand why would you accept 8% of your traffic from abroad, from outside the U.S. jurisdiction. And I mean, in the eyes of Allied Wallet, that's not a problem because the internet, it's global. And if you want to accept transaction, if you have your customer in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Italy, I mean, regardless where he is, and he likes your item, he wants to purchase, he can just go on the website and buy the product. It should not be a problem. Money is money. But, but a lot of the domestic banks, they look at it as potential risk because they don't know the consumer. They don't know where that consumer bank, what kind of underwriting they've done on his account to issue the Visa, MasterCard, whatever it is, payment that he's paying with. And it became an issue. And talking about future, the future of this payment business, I see, and it's grown a lot. I mean, it's grown probably about 300% in the past 2 years. Mobile payments. Mobile payments became the #1 payment option. A lot of people, you see them sitting on benches or, in your hotel room or lying on the couch at the house with the iPhone or the Android phone and just clicking on applications, making transactions and, bypassing even laptops or bypassing travel agency and on and on and on. And the thing that Allied Wallet is working on to make things easier and make things more convenient for consumers, it's called tokenization. Tokenization, it's part of the memory. Whatever you type, it stores in your system, and we're going to link the tokenization into a passcode. Basically, if whatever website you purchase from, if you ever want to go back on it, it memorizes all your information. The only thing you do is just type your password, and will ask you, you agree to this amount, and you can execute transactions. Because we've seen people, they're becoming more impatient in spending time to execute transactions. Same thing with YouTube and many other product out there. Less time is more convenient. So if you shrink the time to execute transaction from 4 minutes to 3 seconds or 4 seconds, it just gain more, more traffic or more business.
Perfect.
That's my say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this is, I think that an applause could come. Don't be afraid, because this is really what we also as magazine, as a publishing house, we would like to do also with the Virtual Financial Summit. So this CEO Summit will be broadcasted inside this platform, this 3D platform that can be reached all over the world. So it's the same idea that you explained and you mentioned. Mr. McMahon, it's your turn. Genmark is a leading designer and manufacturer of high-performance material handling and integrated systems by introducing cutting-edge technologies in robotics and automation. To this end, what are the next frontiers to overtake in order to optimize equipment and factory productivity?
That is a really fantastic question, because it's like, how do I boil the ocean down in factory automation? Where do you start? Let me start right at the beginning of it. Automation, without it, you wouldn't have an iPhone. You wouldn't be talking about e-commerce. You wouldn't have the industry you have today. Automation enables everything. From Henry Ford, when he first designed the first factory automation system back in 1906, to the modern day, we've found greater and greater ways to improve, to modernize, to understand, and all with the, and you made a great point, innovating at a reduction of cost. I'll give you a small example. If you were to use the 1992 technology to build 1 gig of memory on your phone, it would cost $100,000. Today it costs $1, because Samsung, Intel, etc., Toshiba have gone and innovated their factory automation. And how have they done that? They've projected forward what the future needs. They're already, these companies that we're working and talking with, they're already looking ahead 5-10 years down the road. Today we have 4G and LTE on our phones. They're already working on 5G. They're already looking at 6G. And how do you do all that? First, it comes back to, you have to have the principles of very good factory automation. Now, there's an old story told to me by an engineer when I was first getting into factory automation. The factory of the future will be a man and a dog. Okay, just the two of them. The man is there to feed the dog is there to bite the man if he touches any buttons in the room. I don't know whether we'll actually ever get to that point. But thank you. But when I look towards what's going to happen, particularly in the area of robotics, there are several emerging ideas of where we should be. Should robotics be taught? Should we actually, or should we give them intelligence? Should we allow robots to be more like us, that they go off and self-learn? No one goes off and tells you, this is the point where you pick up at last, this is where you put it down. You spend years and years. Whereas in industrial automation today, for factories, we actually teach each point. Now, that's Elon Musk raised that's controversial. Do we enable our factories to become self-learning? Because that ends up in a movie called Terminator, possibly. But, you know, it's one of those things. So automation is here to stay. It's revolutionizing the world. It's revolutioning everything from the car that you drive to the phone that you have to when you go off and get your coffee in the morning. As far as the innovation and sustainability, every piece of it has to make sure that as we do this, that we're making sure that we protect this environment, that we're not consuming the resources that are there, that they're there to help enhance and enable and sustain those resources so we have them for longer. So I'll leave you with this. I think that the responsibility of the factories is not to go for the profitability, but to look at how can factory automation actually make a difference to society.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Cicillinski, let's talk about China. In the fight to limit global warming, no country matters more than China, a massive coal-dependent country which is responsible for 30% of global carbon dioxide emissions. And fortunately, China is moving to a more to a greener business environmental record. But what do you think about the next frontiers in the sustainable business, according also to the fact that international regions and Chinese market could be also interested in improving their green awareness?
Very good question. China has probably the worst environmental problem of any country we know. At the same time, through the carbon market and the clean development mechanism, they were the recipients of billions of dollars, $50 billion, for projects that were reducing emissions, out of which they created their renewable energy infrastructure and industry. And in a few years, 10 years, they became the most important exporter of wind and solar equipment, revolutionizing the solar energy field in the process. That means that the financial market, the carbon market, created the financial incentive that allowed China to take a direction that favored China, because they are the biggest exporter of wind and solar equipment, and the entire world, because we benefit everywhere from the incredible drop in prices from that solar equipment, particularly photovoltaic. What's the lesson? The lesson is that that type of innovation that combines finance with technology is the solution in all regions, particularly in the developing countries, and China is no exception. What revolution do we need? We need to grow in China and the rest of the developing nations carbon negative power plants. This means sources of electricity or power plants which are currently almost half of the emissions of the planet and are 90% fossil, therefore emitting more than anything else in terms of emissions of carbon. They need to become carbon negative, which means that instead of emitting CO2, they clean the atmosphere. Global Thermostat has created a proven technology that has operating plants in Silicon Valley at the Stanford Research Institute. Everybody here is invited to come and see them. And we have our first commercial contract. It's a young company, and I'm the CEO of that company. I created it. With that technology and that operating plants, we can take fossil fuel plants, for example, the 400 megawatt electrical plant that uses coal, can emit 1 or 2 million tons of CO2 per year. Together with this equipment of ours, Global Thermostat, it can become carbon negative, reducing 1 to 2 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, using the residual heat from the plant. This means that China can develop, because they have a tremendous need. They have 500 million people moving from the countryside to the cities. They need electricity to provide jobs. You cannot tell the Chinese not to build power plants. They need electricity, and so do all the poor nations. With this type of technology, which is already patented and commercial in the United States, with plants that you can see operating, you can simultaneously get economic development through the development of power plants which clean the atmosphere and can resolve the problem of climate change. It can be done. It is a very difficult thing to do, but it can be done. It's all about innovation in the direction that we needed and taking the right steps. And China I predict, will become the showpiece.
Thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, we are trying as a publishing house and an award to recognize all the companies in Hong Kong and in the Chinese, Singapore markets that have this commitment to sustainability. And there are many companies, but they should go on what you have already mentioned. Mr. Kavalash, I have a question for you regarding what the International Monetary Fund recently said, that the global economy was more likely to enjoy a reasonable recovery over the next 2 years, benefiting from recent falls in energy prices and exchange rate movements. The World Economic Outlook is, in fact, the first since 2011 to suggest economies are putting the 2009 financial crisis behind them. And you mentioned something like that before. So we are also expecting that India will overcome China regarding also the growth. What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that maybe this crisis is behind us?
I mean, first of all, I love the doctor talk about China, and I seem to agree with her 1,000%. And I love the Chinese subject. I do spend a lot of time in Hong Kong and as well in China. And we probably one of the first e-commerce company has entered the Chinese jurisdiction and conducted business in China, which is about 9 years ago. The economy, of course, it will do better. That's for sure. And the reason why more poor people are making better money than they used to make before, and with the ability to transact online, you can see increase in volume. Every year, it's going up by, give and take, 100, 150%. That's an indication to prove that the internet is connecting the planet. And it's making it much more easier for people to buy product online from different jurisdictions. In regards to India, I pretty much doubt that India will take over China. And I have reasons for that, because majority of the Chinese-owned companies, they government-owned. Of course, they have incorporations. There's a CEO behind the incorporation. I mean, just very similar to Alibaba. Yes. You know, went on the IPO, New York Stock Exchange, $227 billion, but it's Chinese-owned government. Nobody knew it's Chinese-owned government till the company went public and it was announced, and the CEO, he owned 7% of the company. Everybody back in the days, oh, it's owned by Jake, but it's not. So same thing with the Chinese incorporations. Majority of the Chinese incorporation, the government owned, and the Chinese government will not let go. And it's a way to dominate the world, and dominate the world by exporting product, and the product is the Chinese government itself. And they need to put the front man to, to make it easy for government entities to conduct business with them. It's very difficult to have the U.S. government selling product. It will be question mark. Again, on the India market and the other markets, yes, we see a large growth in transactions in India. We see a large growth actually in transaction in Brazil. Brazil, it's a market that I'd be more concerned about in growing than India actually. Brazil, it's a very fast growing market, extremely large population, very smart people, very clever, and spenders as well. And there's a lot of new wealth in Brazil that you'd be surprised. And as well, Mexico. Mexico, it's an amazing country now. It's becoming better. There's a lot of money in Mexico. And the banking system in Mexico improving a lot. And they're expanding more into the transaction world. It means that a lot of banks that never offered merchant accounts services, they offer it now. And they're providing good technology in the mobile payments. And And you know, we see increase in the Mexican transactions as well. The people spending more money online than used to 6 years ago. It really tripled between 6 years and today. And you go down to Latin America, we see a lot of increase in the Latin America business, and as well in the Asian business. Countries like probably you never even you know. Indonesia has grown. Malaysia is doing very well as well, and even Bangladesh. It's a country that people think it's only full with flood, but you know the transactions are picking up, and that's an indication that, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, a lot of the people they used to be considered poor, they haven't access to spend money online, and they're finding ways to spend it, and they're doing it, and that's actually moving the economy to a better place. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your input. More than also the International Monetary Fund outlook, you give us more inputs and causes for reflection. Mr. McMahon, Jarmac has an international expertise also in the Asian market. What do you think about the next frontiers in the international regions, and will the US also have a prominent role? What kind of role will it have?
So if we look at the US since 1945, the US has become the global leader in innovation. Where do you start? Do you want to start with the space program? Do you want to start with the internet, telecommunications, on and on and on? But what has happened if you look at China now, where China was, I first was there in 1991. It's a different country from 1991 to today. If someone had said to me in 1991 that China would be the second largest economy by GDP in the world, I would have told them, take different medication. It is astonishing how much it's changed. And why is that? China has a systemic 5-year plan, which they follow almost like a religion. Since Deng Xiaoping took over from the cult of Mao Zedong, and since the country has moved forward, they revolutionized themselves in regard to innovation. And at first, it was at the sacrifice of sustainability. Your points are well made. The Yangtze River, what went on there, travesty, etc., etc. The way they displaced 1 million people ad hoc. But in recent times, they've also been given a little bit of a lesson by the economic community. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and Thailand have started to pick up much of what China would have done historically. So China in response has started to innovate. They've started to buy US companies and then modify and apply and improve those technologies. They have the second largest railway system in the world right now. In the space of 5 years, they've managed to connect millions of people, as you were saying, that have to travel all the time. They've started to become an innovator. Are they yet at the level of where Germany, France, Italy, Switzerland, Japan, America is? Not quite, but they have a space program. They are selling jet aircraft. They have, they're working on next generation technology for the internet. So China is going to figure very, very greatly in our future. Now, in regard to India, as you asked me earlier on, India is slightly different. India has always been a much more democratic and capitalistic society, so they focused more where companies and individuals rather than the government get behind. And I think until the government gets as involved as the way the Chinese government has got involved, remember the American government was hugely involved in most of the innovation that took place in the 50s and 60s, which is why you are here today. Until you see that in India, then China will continue to hold the lead. But India will do very well. Who knew that Jaguar would get to have a better motor car because an Indian company bought them? I own a Jaguar. It's a great car. So that's not a sponsorship, by the way. But I look at the way also these other companies, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, also emerging countries, incredibly young populations. You go to Saigon and people are between the ages of 20 to 25 and they're all excited and they want to generate new ideas. I think that, and just to that point, if you look across the table, this is the North American CEO conference. There's not a single American sitting here. And Exactly, which means that we see America as a place to come and be able to innovate. We don't go to China. We don't go to Singapore. We don't go to Korea. This is the only country in the world where you can actually become an American. Nowhere else can you do that. And that allows that success. So I think America will always be in the lead. I think that it'll always have the preeminent place of where you can come and develop a dream and live a dream and become the CEO and bring a product to market. The other places will be fantastic. They'll be a great place to go and have to draw resources from. But America, I believe, will always be in front.
Thank you. Thank you so much.